10 games into the season, let's get into some freshman sleepers for the 2025 NBA Draft. This is Floor and Ceiling, let's break them down. Jeremiah Fears isn't going to be a sleeper for much longer. The Oklahoma freshman reclassified to play in this college season, and right now I see him as a top 20 pick who could maybe even rise into the lottery. Fears is an on-ball point guard who's been highly productive on really high usage at a young age. Come draft night, he'll still be 18. I really value the Oklahoma freshman's passing. He can play fast in transition, but also slow down in the half court. Fears creates threes, and he also makes his bigs better. He executes pocket passes out of ball screens, and he fizzes passes over the top of defenses. The Sooners freshman is creative and accurate with his deliveries, and that can include jump passes. Thinking long term, Fears' turnovers should go down, but I can excuse that for now given his usage, role, and age. Going forward, I'd like for Fears to keep improving his left hand as a scorer and passer. I think that NBA teams can still target that, but overall, I like his pace a lot as a ball handler. The Oklahoma prospect changes speed and directions well, even though he's not that much of a blow-by threat. Despite that, Fears does have plenty of potential in transition though, especially once his handle and body improve. I already like Fears' handle quite a bit, but he can get rushed when trying to go full speed or when trying to play with a lot of contact. Overall though, I enjoy how Fears can chain moves together and break down a defender before getting into his drive or his shot. The 18-year-old guard's handle is dynamic and reactive in tight spaces, which he uses to create advantages for himself and others. As a scorer, Fears is a smooth and willing jumper, although the conversion needs to go up. Again though, Oklahoma is demanding a lot from him, and I find Fears' process and space creation to be largely encouraging. Down the line, I buy him having 3-level scoring potential, and he's knocking on my lottery. By the numbers, Jase Richardson has a case to be considered the best and most efficient freshman in college basketball. Jase, the son of Jason Richardson, is having an ultra-efficient season, although on pretty low volume. He's shooting 80% at the basket, 50% off the dribble, and 50% again from 3. Richardson's efficiency extends to his playmaking as well. Jase's assist-to-turnover ratio is impressive, and he barely loses the ball when he has to make a decision. However, all of this comes having played less than 50% of his team's total minutes and only having taken 20 shots at the rim and from deep. Richardson's facilitating has been impressive within his context, but also it has to be said that he's averaging less than 2 assists per game. Right now, what I find Richardson to be best at is making decisions off the catch. He's really dangerous attacking closeouts, and I like how he combines his speed and his touch in those situations. The question, ultimately, is whether Richardson can up his usage while maintaining his outlier good type of efficiency. Right now, I just don't think that he does enough. For example, Jase only takes 2 threes per game, which is way too low for a relatively small off-ball guard. As a playmaker, I like how Richardson uses his speed to get paint touches, create advantages, and kick the ball out for threes. The Michigan State prospect is not overly crafty as a facilitator, but he is very reliable, making the correct decision out of spot-ups. Looking at the defensive side of the court, Jase has gotten stops on the ball, and he's shown impressive instincts off the ball for a freshman. His numbers can still improve, but he's good at keeping his man in front with rangy, parallel strides, and at contesting without fouling. Off the ball, Richardson is engaged and disciplined. He can help at the nail or the paint, and he doesn't make many mistakes. That said, I do think that Richardson's versatility is ultimately limited, and I want to see his volume and production keep going up on both ends, even if that comes at the cost of some efficiency. Thomas Sorber is another freshman who's a statistical darling in most draft communities. He's been really productive so far, as was the case in high school, and although I'm not super high on the Georgetown prospect, he does have my second round interest. Sorber's two-way production, especially at the basket, his steady decision making, and his untapped athletic improvements are ultimately too hard to overlook. With Sorber, we have to start with the numbers, which really play out in his favor. He's a powerful rebounder who also gets a lot of blocks, doesn't turn the ball over, and in general, creates a lot of defensive events. Sorber is third among all freshmen in box plus minus, only behind Derek Queen and Dylan Harper. He's been dominant in the paint, shooting over 80% at the rim, and he's also making about 77% of his free throws. I don't really buy Sorber as a jump shooter, but evidently he has touch on some level. Having mentioned this though, I do think that he struggled against the higher level of competition that he's faced so far when he hasn't been beating up on lesser opponents. To be totally honest, I'm unsure about how Sorber's style of play translates up to the NBA. He's at his best posting up, which is also what he does the most, but I don't think that those looks will exist against bigger, longer, and more athletic bigs in the NBA. I personally prefer Sorber as a roller, but his numbers in that department aren't as good right now. I will say though that he has good touch from the charity stripe, and his conversion at the rim in general, not just in the pick and roll, is encouraging. Defensively, Sorber has been putting together an impressive freshman season. However, I'm waiting until this upcoming stretch of competitive games to make more of a final judgment. Most recently against Syracuse, I felt like Sorber was solid in the pick and roll, but more mixed in space. He had some struggles down low against Eddie Lampkin Jr., and even though he's a type of center that Sorber won't encounter much in the NBA, I do want to keep seeing how the Georgetown big fares against fives who are stronger and more physical than him. This upcoming slate against Creighton, Seton Hall, Xavier, Marquette, UConn, and St. John's will tell us a lot about where Sorber's draft stock should stand. Joson Sanon previously said that he would be a one and done, and it's tough to feel like that's a bad decision the way that his freshman season at Arizona State has been going. Through his first 10 games, Sanon is averaging about 15 points, 4 rebounds, and 1 assist on 52% shooting from 3. Sanon is a scorching movement shooter with decent but not great positional size at around 6'5" in shoes with a 6'6" wingspan. It's not his athleticism, but rather the way that he shoots the ball, which will get him on draft boards. Sanon is drilling 52% of his threes, 58% of his catch and shoots, and 51% of his off-the-dribble jumpers. As of right now, a little under half of his total shots come from 3. But honestly, shooting has to be Sanon's NBA skill because he does little else. Sanon has only made 42% of his shots at the rim, a figure which dwindles down to 37% in the half court. The 18-year-old also doesn't get to the free throw line where he's shooting under 70%. His shooting indicators are good to very good everywhere else, but that is not great. On top of that, Sanon is limited as a decision maker, and he doesn't really contribute as a rebounder or defender either. All of that is to say that the Arizona State prospect's shooting looks really good, but he'll struggle to stick in the NBA unless he makes leaps in basically every other department. Sanon is definitely producing, but his underlying numbers and his lack of versatility as seen on tape are cause for concern. And at this moment in time, I cannot justify placing a prospect who might be a special shooter, but who cannot put pressure on the rim, facilitate, rebound, or defend higher than the mid to late second round. Jacob Cofie is one of the most slept on prospects in college basketball, although the 2025 NBA draft might be a little too early for the Virginia forward. My pitch on Cofie is that he's an athletic 6'10" forward who finishes plays by blocking shots and rebounding, and then he flashes upside as a vertical spacer in terms of finishing above the rim and being able to shoot threes. The conversion, of course, is a big factor in the latter. Cofie is only making 28% of his threes, but his volume is encouraging and he's made all 12 of his free throws this season. Of course, that's a small sample size, but overall, I look at Cofie as a prospect similar to Taylor Hendricks, a 4 who can also play the 5 and who finishes plays by rebounding, blocking shots, taking threes, and dunking the ball. That said, the UVA prospect needs more seasoning and more experience. He's a young freshman who can get lost off the ball or randomly lose engagement for no real reason. Cofie's threes can fluctuate from clean makes to bad misses, for example, and I'm not sure that many NBA organizations will want to live with those types of growing pains right now. That's why I think that focusing on the 2026 draft is probably more advisable, but Cofie has still been very productive this season. When he's locked in, he's impactful rotating and altering shots at the basket despite still needing better discipline. Cofie also has ground coverage tools and he mostly manages to stay out of foul trouble. It's not the fouls that he needs to work on, but rather cleaning up other avoidable mistakes on closeouts, box outs, or rebounds. Going forward, I also want to see Cofie leverage his size at the rim better and become a more assertive finisher. He barely gets to the free throw line right now despite having made all of his foul shots, and he can still contort his body or take weird angles to avoid full contact at the basket.